Welcome back, Marcus. In a minute.
Welcome to Decoding TV's coverage of Severance Season 2. If you're just tuning in for the first time, by the way, you can find this podcast wherever you get your podcast. We are going to be covering Severance Season 2 every week, talking about the plot, talking about the mysteries. And if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a subscribe, won't you, at youtube.com/@decodingtv. I'm David Chen here with Patrick Klepek. Patrick, we just talked on last week's podcast episode about Severance, or this week's podcast episode about Severance Season 1 finale. Obviously, we're super psyched about the Severance Season 2 premiere. Now that we have seen it, what did you think of the premiere? Are you happy to be back in the world of Lumen Industries?
I am happy to be back in, well, not on the hands of Lumen. They seem like those hands are a little cold and calculated, but I'm happy to be back in the world of Severance. And I think, in our discussion about the season finale of season 1, one of the things I was really curious about was, what are the questions that season 2, what's it going to be asking? Is it interested in the mystery of Lumen, the lore of this world, the world building that naturally happens in mystery box shows as they enter multi-season arcs? How is it going to balance that against what I found to be the most interesting part of season 1, which is, what does it mean to be these people? What does that reflect how our own and, outside of Severance, like our relationship with work? And I'm happy to report, at least in this first episode, hot damn, it's asking all the right questions, and it's asking even more interesting ones that I hadn't really considered, and I cannot wait to see where this season goes.
I feel largely the same way. It's so good to be watching the show again. Big fan of the show. Episode was solid. I did have one major disappointment with the episode, but we will talk about that momentarily. But overall, glad the show is back, and I would agree with you that the show doesn't seem to be veering off and wildly and like taking a different approach to season 1, right? It's kind of like still focused on the same questions, still focused. It's very much a character-driven drama / with mystery box elements, and so huge fan of Severance. Glad it's back. Can't wait to watch the rest of the season. Let's talk about the stuff that happens this episode. All right, Mark S awakens. And he's back on the severed floor. And there's this incredible sequence where he runs around underground at work trying to find his way. It lasts for minutes. And it's incredible. Like, I don't even know how this is achieved. Obviously, I think some combination of practical and CG, but like the camera is basically making impossible movements, right? It's appearing or moving towards locations that should be impossible for the camera to do. There is a style of shooting using cameras that are called like motion control cameras, where like you can make like extremely precise movements with a camera. The YouTuber MKBHD has used this camera sometimes, where it's basically like, think of it like a camera that's on a robot arm, right? It can replicate these extremely precise movements. It felt like that style of cinematography, where it's like these incredibly precise movements by a robot, except it'd be physically impossible for a robot to actually do the movements. So I thought that was just such a striking visual and a bold way to open the season. Patrick Klepek, any thoughts?
Well, it's disorienting, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've watched this first season. We think we know these cubicles. We think we know the layout of this place. It's as much as we can grasp it together. And like the opening shots of this show, the sequence as Mark runs through the hallways, I think is the show regrounding you with, you don't really know what's happening here. These characters are lost. You're lost. And we're not even sure what it means to be found or what's at the end of this hallway. And I think the longer that scene goes on, like the more interesting it gets. And I think it's for an episode of television that doesn't spend a lot of time being like, what happened last season? Let's catch you up. Emotionally, that sequence, I think, sets you back with where these characters left us off last season, which is a flight of confusion and sadness and excitement, just a ton of emotions, and you don't know what to do with it except maybe sprint down a hallway and try and tell a friend.
The thing that really messed me up is contemplating what Mark's lived experience must be, because like I think we understand that this is the first time any Mark has awakened since the events of last season, right?
Yeah.
And imagine he's like at this party, he's meeting people, and then he screams out she's alive, and then boom, the next thing he knows he's back in the elevator. Like that would be so, like, because his whole life has been waking up and going to sleep in the elevator, right? And so it's like that'd be such a trip to be somewhere else and then be transported into the elevator. I think that would be like a huge disorienting thing that the show really brings to life. So anyway, Mark is back where he started. He is back at Lumen. His mission to get himself out of Lumen did not succeed. And we notice some changes. The wellness center at Lumen is gone. Like there's no evidence that it ever existed. It's vanished. And therefore Miss Casey is gone. He finds his workspace and sees that he has an entirely new set of colleagues. For him, it's only been moments after the events of the season 1 finale, but we learn in reality, it's actually been 5 months. Mr. Milch has replaced Miss Gobel as the manager of the severed floor, and he also has a new secretary, Miss Wong, who appears to be a teenager. We learn what happened in the interceding 5 months after the events of last season. The 4 of them apparently became super famous, and their actions led to a raft of improvements and reforms at Lumen to make Severance more humane. So clearly, Mark's Audi decided it was still worth returning back to work at Lumen, but none of the rest of the crew wanted to come back. This leads to Mark S. sabotaging one of Milch's activities in an attempt to talk to the board and beg for the rest of his team back. Milch sends him out of the workplace, and when he reawakens, he reunites with the other characters from last season. So they're shown a video about the Macrodat uprising, which dramatizes the events of last season and what happened with the season finale, and all the bounteous reforms like new snacks that they have.
Hey, was that voiced by Keanu Reeves?
I think so. That's what it felt like. Sounded like that.
Yeah.
Random.
I'm watching it and I pause the episode and turn to my wife. Is like, listen to that. Hold on, we're gonna listen to that voice again. And then she's like, that's Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, no, that's Keanu Reeves. I think that's Keanu Reeves. It sounded like him.
So the video is pretty funny, kind of this like claymation animation style, and
very cool.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the show looks expensive, Patrick Klepek. The show looks like they spent several $100 million on it, which they did. Anyway, then each of them is given an option about whether or not to stay. And they also huddle together and share what happened while they were on the outside. And during the course of this, Helly lies about what happened when they're on the outside. And let's pause here. First of all, she says, hey, I was watching a nature documentary in my lonely apartment, and I found a gardener outside, tried to explain the situation to him, and it didn't work.
A night gardener?
I think so.
And
a night gardener?
John Turturro's character says, a night gardener? Like, that's the best shitty story you could come up with? Even he, which is actually kind of shocking. Like, if she was gonna lie, that is an extremely shoddy story that she told. My first reaction when I watched this was, that is not Helly R, that is Helena Egan, and she is her Audi.
Oh.
Yeah, you just thought she was lying, Patrick Klepek. I could tell you just thought she was lying, right? But like,
well, I mean, it's an understandable like
your conclusion was she's lying for some reason, right?
Well, if what you just proposed happens to the show, that lines up, like that would make a lot of sense, that the show could do the like kind of mind swapping in the two places. So that is certainly plausible. I also think it's plausible that for the show implants in you the idea like 5 months, what a long time, a lot of time to think. Well, they didn't have time to like, that's not how it works for them. It's just a light switch. Like it's as though they went into a coma. And so she just had one of the most dramatic moments of her life as this innie, in so much as like how one would define life for these people. and then is like immediately like reunited with her friends after the high of that, and then has had no time to really process who she is in the outside world. So I
Wow.
that you're
you took a very so that's an extremely she's
it's
a babe in the
embarrassing.
woods.
Like, would you want to say, hey guys, so group sesh, like, so like you got to go see like your family, and like you saw like a love that's not gonna happen, like, and we don't even get to one of the characters to explain what like he was going through when he was back here, like letting them all go out. So I'm Dr. Evil, like it's bad. Whoops, like we're all here because you know what I mean. I think it's plausible and understandable that one would not want to admit, even if she's not the Annie is not culpable for the actions of the outie. Like if you found out, you were like, well, I'm the horrible doctor running this place. Like, I don't know that I'd be rushing out to tell all my friends that, like, that's who I am.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's a fair point, Patrick Klepek. I don't think that's why she lied. I think there's one of two reasons, right? Either one, she is Helena Egan, the outie, and they figured out a way to disable Severance for her, or other stuff happened during that 5 months, right? Like Helly R has lived more time, because the Helly R that we saw moments ago in her mind it has just been telling off all the Lumen people, they torture us in there, and then she got tackled, and that was what happened with Helly R, right? So then she awakens in the elevator and she's lying about it. That makes no sense. So something had to happen between when she was at the party, the gala or whatever, and when she awakened, for Helly R to decide that she's gonna lie, in my opinion. So it's one of those two things. Either Helly R has lived a whole separate life in the 5 months, or that's not Helly R. That's Helena Egan. So I would bet money that it's one of those two options, and we'll find out which one of us is true. If it's Patrick is right, and she just was a little modest about being
I'm not
his
disputing
daughter.
your theory. I don't think it's implausible that one would be embarrassed. It's like, I am a terrible person. Like, high fives, everybody. Like, I suck. I'm the reason we're here. I think it's reasonable to like not want to talk about that.
That's fair.
Part. But I think your interpretation also would be that's a fun wrinkle for the show. That
absolutely, yeah. Are you watching Helly R, or are you watching Helena
and especially
Egan?
Given some of the ideas introduced, some of the expansions to the Lumen office, the idea of interactions between the two worlds like seems to be an idea that season 2 is going to start playing with. So like that would be a very natural extension of that. So I think you could be on to something.
All right. So at this point, all the characters need to kind of go through their own individual journeys of whether or not to stay, right? They are given the option of leaving. But the thing is, as we already know, leaving the severed floor means that they're basically going to die. Like this version of them will die. So they need to decide if they would prefer to die or if they prefer to stick around, because they know that on some level their outies are probably okay with them sticking around. So each of the characters kind of goes through a little journey. Dylan is cool with staying, certainly, and Dylan and Irving shares a moment where Dylan begs Irving to stay. Irving tells Dylan about the drawing he saw, the black hallway with an arrow pointing down. It's not the break room. And they kind of embrace, and they have this really close moment. There was this line, Patrick Klepek, that I didn't understand, and I didn't know if you had anything to say about it, where Dylan says, "I'm your favorite perk." And then Irving says, "Don't bring them into this." End quote. I didn't understand what that was about. Did you
I
have
think
any
that could be you're adopting the language of our oppressor.
Yeah. Actually,
they use the term perk.
Yeah.
Like
great interpretation. Yeah.
We're friends. Like we mean something to each other. Like don't
bring
their language.
The language of Lumen into this. It's kind of like when I start talking in my company's leadership principles when I'm at home with with my wife. It's not welcomed. Helly R and Mark have a conversation about whether they're going to stay, and Helly R says, "Hey, I'm going to stay because I want to help you figure out what happened to Miss Casey. That's why Helly R is so generous in deciding to stick around. And so
Mm.
eventually, and then Milchik introduces Dylan to this concept of something called an Audi family visitation suite. One of the big plot lines of season 1 was Dylan has children, and he learned that he has children during an activation of the overtime contingency. And it's really upsetting to Dylan that he doesn't know his children, he doesn't know his family, and he wants to know them. And so this Audi family visitation suite theoretically will give him the ability to see his Audi's family, and that's something that Dylan would find meaningful.
Did you read some of the? I need to like pause. I'm sure this will be studied in a Lost-esque fashion. Like some of the language on that architecture document is like there's almost like there's something called the memory wall, like over to the right where they're like chairs, almost like like you would observe like children playing or like it's. But the like calling it the memory wall is a really like things are never as they seem here at Lumen, especially as they're playing with our perceptions of reality and memory and sense of self. But the memory wall sure suggests to me it's not going to be as simple as you just get to like have a relationship with your children.
My interpretation of memory wall was it's where we're gonna hang memories. Like you can take pictures and put them on the wall, or people can put pictures there and you can see them.
Maybe.
That was kind of my interpretation of memory wall. But anyway, Milkchick makes Dylan promise to not tell the rest of the crew about the family visitation suite because none of them have families theoretically.
They're all single.
They're all single. They don't have anyone who would want to visit them. Certainly not Helena Egan. Certainly not Mark with a sister and a niece. So yeah, a lot of deception still occurring at Lumen. So the episode ends with the status quo essentially being restored from the first season. They're all back and working for Mark and Lumen, and everyone's happy again, I guess, in their situation, or they are at peace with the idea that they're there. And cool episode, some great moments in the episode, and in particular, like the Irving subplot is actually was moving in season 1, but it was really packs an emotional wall up this episode when Irving says, that's not our world out there. That's something he said, like it's not our world out there, like. Because he goes to see Bert and sees that Bert is already happily married in the outside world, right? And it's like it's not for me. And he was happier when he didn't know about the outside world. And Irving is somebody who always struggled to like. He was always like a goody two shoes on the inside, and you can tell this whole thing has been very disruptive to his life. But Patrick Klepek, I was pretty disappointed that we didn't see the aftermath of what happened last season, right? I was pretty disappointed we didn't see anything from those 5 months. Like, I'm really curious. Let me just put it this way: I have a healthy skepticism that things have happened in the way that Milchik said they did.
Well,
right?
Yes. If you the trailer that we listened to broadly covers the first episode, but there is a line in there where Milchik appears to be talking to Audi Mark to convince them to come back to Lumen. Like I promise you that any Mark is very happy. I think is something along the lines that you heard. So I'm suspicious of any of the information that's been presented. Like the reforms that they're famous. For what reason do you have to believe any of this information that is being presented to you? How much of the outside world knows anything or believes anything that happened? Who knows? Like I think you are right to be. Like this show is about sense of self, perception of self, perception, like understanding of self-worth and how we interpret that. Thus, whatever Lumen tells you what you should think, believe, and feel, you should probably set that to the side with a healthy dose of skepticism. And I suspect, like you're right, that 5 months was chosen for a reason. That's a lengthy amount of time for this show to fill in a lot of important gaps that I suspect will be filled in as the show progresses.
I agree.
And it's funny, you pointing out the notion that Helly could actually be like a reverse, like sort of an agent, like implanted. Like, that didn't occur to me watching the show, but now that you've said it, I was like, damn, that seems pretty likely. Now I hope that isn't like a episode 7 reveal. Like, if something like that's going to happen, I hope that is dispensed of or like given to the audience as information they know sooner rather than later.
Well, I think it's meant. Here's the thing. Here's the other thing, Patrick. Is I don't think we've seen Helly lie like that in the show before, right? Like everything we've seen of Helly, she's an open book. You kind of get it's what it says on the tin. Like you get, you know what I'm saying? Like she has her ups and pluses and minuses, but like I think she's always been like an earnest person, and she's only ever been deceptive when she's trying to. She's never been like deceptive with that crew of people. And so to watch her like lie in cold blood like that is just, it was actually kind of chilling. It's like, what happened to that character? Either it's something happened to that character that's horrible, or it's not that person. You know, those are the two options.
Or I guess option C is it is her and she's lying because she has to. Like, you know, like what happened in those 5 months? Like you could imagine
been compelled
that she's being compelled
to
like, because like the I guess the evidence I'd put in favor of that version of the character is when they're in the hallway talking about what they should do next. Like, should they stay? Should they go? Like Mark's desire to his complicated feelings about this person who is, quote, his wife. The way Helly snaps into, like, you don't owe him jack shit.
Right.
Like, you don't owe him anything. That's not you. That's the Helly.
That's a very convincing Helly R performance.
That's what I like. And could Elaine, like, could the Audi do that?
Yeah, good question.
I don't know that the Audi could say with that emotional conviction.
Yeah.
Like, F this whole infrastructure. Like, that, like, so that leans me towards that. I think both things can be true. She's lying. It's still her, but she's being compelled to lie for likely understandable reasons. But we shall see. That adds an interesting wrinkle to where all this could go. And one thing we didn't even get into was it seems like we're going to get kind of an arc with Milch this season. Like that is there were elements of the bureaucracy. Like, what does it mean to be a manager within Lumen? His obsession over getting his name changed on the monitor to reflect that he's the one in charge now. I think if this show is like broadly about like a study of work, like our relationship with work and identity and progress and admiration and being like seen like as being good at something, like that is true of like middle managers as well. And like, what does it mean? Like, I don't think Milch he's a bad guy in season 1, but like, it would not shock me if we get to the end of season 2 and it's like, wow, like that guy, he's gotten like his actual story is like tragic and upsetting. And I'm interested to see if they have an exploration of like, that layer of the bureaucracy that exists within the severed floor, because the severed floor itself has its own office politics that are beyond just like what Lumen deems the experiment to be, or however you want to characterize what's happening on that floor.
Yeah. I love that scene where he is trying to get the name on the monitor changed, because I think it just shows you that everyone who works in an office environment is suffering some kind of indignity, right? That they're like, you think your boss has it better off than you, but it's like, nope, they're just in a different level of being disrespected than you are.
Sitting in an empty office with what appears nothing to do. Like, by all accounts, like he's also experienced 5 months, hasn't even unpacked the boxes. What's in the boxes? Who could say? And the only thing he has to show for any of this is a monitor that should say like his name, and he can't even get that.
So yeah, I agree that whether we get more of Milch's character is going to be pretty interesting. I think one of the things that season 1 taught us is don't believe anything that Lumen says. So like, we will refer to statements that Milch has made, but like, it doesn't mean we believe everything that he's saying. One of the things that he has said is what was happening with Miss Cobell. Like, why was Miss Cobell following Mark S around on the outside, on the inside. He claims it's because she became obsessed with him and wanted to seduce him on the outside and inside, with the innie and the outie forming basically
a thruple, I
a
believe
severed
is the
thruple,
term he uses.
which is pretty messed up.
Yeah, gross concept. Don't like it.
Pretty messed up.
Zap that one from my brain.
I guess the idea there is you could be with someone, but like they'd be two separate people. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Is it cheating? Who could say?
because it's them, right? Yeah. Is that cheating? Open. I ask you the question, Patrick. Is it cheating if you're with another person?
I think that seems like that needs to fall in the bucket of like emotional cheating. I feel like, sure, you're
Emotional
certain
cheating, right.
definitions, but probably like if you have to ask the question, David, you probably already know the answer. And another question I suspect the show will revisit. I think this is just laying breadcrumbs that the show is going to explore further, which is like the show gives everyone an out. Like now maybe Lumen's lying, right? Like maybe they're lying, but like let's take it at face value that they could just walk out the door and essentially end their lives. They escape this existence, but their existence ends. And sure, maybe there's a different resolution to this show where I don't know if like clones do exist. Maybe you can go into, another, like, I don't know, like it's within the realm of possibility that there's a like happy resolution, but like much of this show seems like escape is still tragedy for these characters. And I suspect if in the first episode, we're already introducing that concept of like, what does success mean? If we destroy Lumen, we just destroy ourselves. And like the show spends so much time for us to see them as full people. Like they are the innie and the outie, but like they are their own people. They are not just the people on the outside, cut in half. And I expect the show to continue exploring that in really interesting ways if it's going to bring that up as soon as the first episode.
There's an article in the New York Times called "She is in love with ChatGPT." It's about a 28-year-old woman falling in love with her AI chatbot, and there's questions coming up about whether or not it's cheating or not if she's in a relationship and she's also in love with AI. But a Marianne Brandon, a sex therapist, in the article is quoted as saying the following: "What are relationships for all of us? They're just neurotransmitters being released in our brain. I have those neurotransmitters with my cat. Some people have them with God. It's going to be happening with a chatbot. We can say it's not a real human relationship. It's not reciprocal, but those neurotransmitters are really the only thing that matters in my mind." End quote. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of chilling because it's basically saying, like, a lot of people would laugh at this. They would say, "Oh, well, that's not a real thing. You're falling in love with a machine. It doesn't make any, it's not sentient. It's not a real thing." And this woman, Marianne Brandon, is saying, actually, if it does all the same things that a real relationship does, isn't it in fact real? I don't think that's directly related with what we're talking about here in the Severance show, but it's definitely adjacent. Definitely adjacent to the things we're talking about. So anyway, but yes, Miss Cobell, pretty messed up stuff with the thruple concept. Patrick, there was another thing I wanted to discuss, which is I feel like I hate to get too political on this podcast, but I feel like
oh no, not again, David.
There is an analogy to real life between the quote unquote reforms that Lumen made and kind of any time a company makes changes for the better and or that are ostensibly for the better to improve things for their workers. And I think a real recent example of this would be, I would say, in the wake of George Floyd's killing and like a lot of DEI programs sprang up about like understanding more the diverse experiences of the workforce, and all this stuff sprang out. It's like, hey, like actually, like we now understand these things. It's better now. Of course, many of those companies have rolled back those programs in the time since then. But when Milch is talking about how, like we've actually made all these changes, it's actually so much better now. we have good reason to doubt that they're being earnest, right? We have good reason to doubt that like Lumen at its core has made an actual genuine change. And I think it mirrors this kind of skepticism in real life that people have of companies that are also theoretically making changes. Does that make sense? Am I reaching too far, Patrick, or do you see it?
No, that's a mirror image of the opportunistic nature of a company
Yeah.
caught doing a transgression, uses it as an opportunity to apologize, quote, and then also, cover themselves in glory by like the apology is like, oh, well, they've acknowledged they made an error. They make some changes along the margins, but actually the exploitation, continues. As an aside, the way that Dylan reacts to the depiction of him eating the candy is so goddamn fun. Like the look on, he's like, I would maybe I'd do that a little bit. Like, come on, like not like that. Like, it's so good. I mean, he has so many good lines in this first episode. Like when they're walking down the hallway, he's like, Mark, what'd you do to the other guys? Like, I'm not really sure. Like, I didn't mean to get them killed. He's like, who cares? F those guys. Like they're probably bad anyway. Like he is just so funny in this first episode.
I agree. Great actor in Severance who plays Dylan, Zach Cherry. Also, we saw him in Succession as well. Really funny in that show, and I think this is like kind of a really good role for him because it really gives him the opportunity to shine. Okay, I was gonna run down some of the mysteries from season 1 of Severance, and we could talk about like which one of them are still open. But is there anything else you wanted to share about your reaction to this episode? We haven't really even talked about the new crew members because they're in the episode for such a short period of time and then they're seemingly gone. So
really, given some of the casting there, I don't think that's the last we've seen of them
right.
for sure. I think
Aaliyah Shawkat is there.
Yeah.
I think Bob Balaban, right,
Yeah.
is there, and these are like very well known character actors. So I don't know, Patrick. It seems conceivable to me they might be like cameos, right?
Sure. I mean, they put Keanu Reeves in as a voiceover show, but like I can imagine a lot. Like Ben Stiller knows a lot of people. Like, so does Adam Scott. Like, so some stunt casting would absolutely line up as something that people would be interested in doing. I think, I think part of my enthusiastic reaction to this episode is just because I missed this world, and so I think it's a pretty good episode, but one that is mostly just table setting, getting us back to the status quo before it. This is one of those instances where I prefer shows coming out episodically, but sometimes I do like it when you get episodes 1 and 2 and it's like, okay, I'm back in the world, but now what's happening? And like, we're back in the world. We don't know what's happening. And I suspect next week is when we get a better inkling of like, what's going on? What kind of journey are our characters going on? Because I mean, the show even it almost feels like the concluding shot of this episode almost feels like the show apologizing. It's like, I know, boy, it took a long time to get these people back in a room together, right? Like, let's just take a deep breath. Let's appreciate that. Like, let's be excited. We have a new season of Severance because they're all just kind of smiling, and we know so like awful things are on the horizon. No doubt. I'm sure it will not be all happiness this season on Severance, but I'm glad to be back, and I'm hopeful next week we'll have a little better insight into what are we actually doing this season on the show.
Absolutely. Agreed with all of that. All right, so there's a bunch of things that are just random things I want to mention throughout the episode that happened. One is we see Milch hand Mark a newspaper with hey, like you guys were feted as heroes and all that. And one thing I appreciated was that massive portions of the newspaper were blacked out. So it kind of like, because they can't really share that much stuff about the outside world with them as severed people on the inside. So like, I thought that was a nice touch. What did you make of Miss Wong, who appears to be the new Milchik, as it were, on the inside? Just kind of like a really off-kilter thing, I think, right?
It's very, very funny that the episode does this a couple of times. The characters vocalize what the audience would be thinking, which is like, what the hell, man? It's a kid. Like, what's going on here? And I'm just glad that someone says that. It's because that's clearly what the show, the reaction it wants to get out of you is like, hey, whatever you think of Severance as a concept or an action that someone might take to, have in their lives, they're consenting adult. They're a consenting adult that is making that choice. What's up with this 13-year-old that's like working the desk? And I suspect that will. There's more complicating in the same way that you're suspecting there's a double agent in their midst. Maybe the way the technology works is a little more complicated or flexible than we've been made to believe, or something much more sinister, which is like this young girl has an innie that maybe she's not aware of.
Well, because Milchick is not severed, right? So in the Milchick is kind of Miss Cobell's right-hand man, and then theoretically Miss Wong is Milchick's right-hand person, and so but Milchick is not severed, and so like so I don't think Miss Wong is severed either. But I'm like, is there an advantage to having children run this place? Are they like? Does it make their minds easier to wipe maybe later because you don't want them to remember anything? So that's something that was on my mind. Once again, I want to point out that the parallels between Lumen and Apple are shockingly resonant, right? This idea of you work in a top secret lab where like secrecy is a core part of the culture. The design is highly prized. There is almost religious worship of the founder of the company. All these components are just like, it just is wild that Apple is making the show. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I just want to point that out as well. I don't know if you got any Apple tingles while you're watching this episode, Patrick.
Well, I mean, just the white aesthetic, right? Like there are not intentionally, I don't think, but like you can see parallels between how Apple designs and colors its own products and the kind of stark, sterile nature of the world of Severance. Yeah, I'm with you. It is an interesting parallel to draw.
I am trying to figure out trying to point out a few other things that happen in the episode. So in the macro dat video, they talk about bounteous reforms, new snacks, hall passes. Not even sure what that is about. I guess the ability to walk the halls or travel to other departments. Pineapple bobbing. That's a thing that sounds incredibly painful.
that mirror, the like circus hall of mirrors where the person depicted in it is like very upset to be there.
Yeah. Not all of them are perks. Okay, and then I guess let's just talk about like
maybe the child came up with them, right? Like that seems like something a child people would love bobbing for pineapples. Pineapples are sharp. Like would you want to put a pineapple in your mouth? Go to the store. Well, don't put the pineapple in your mouth at the store, but like it wouldn't be. I'm not sure how you get your mouth around that pineapple.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of the outstanding mysteries from season 1 that we're expecting to get answered this season. We talked a little bit about this last episode of the podcast, but I think still open questions of what is Lumen up to and what is macro data refinement doing. Like we don't have any progress on that. We learned a lot about Miss Cobell, if Milchick is correct. Like we learned what her deal was, so she's clearly mentally unstable. We know very little about the board. We actually know even less about Miss Casey now than we did last season. Like she's gone. Like we have no trace of her. So open question what's going on there. Nothing else about the testing floor other than Irving told Dylan about the testing floor. So that's a new thing. Nothing new about the goats. Nothing new about Ragabi. So like still like the main mysteries from season 1 have not really been moved forward. That's fine. No complaints there. I'm just saying like if you're wondering kind of like what are the big things that everyone's talking about online and speculating about, like those are the things I kind of want to refer back to see like have we made any progress on those. And we haven't really. This is just about, as you said, Patrick, kind of resetting the stakes again. So yeah. Anything else to say about the season 2 premiere? Pretty solid. I'm again still pretty disappointed we didn't see the aftermath of season 1 finale. Like I really wanted to know what happened there. and I assume we will probably get some glimpse of that in future episodes, and certainly find out what happened in the intervening 5 months. But yeah, uh, anything else, Patrick Klepek?
Yeah, I guess final thought I would have is I am interested to see what the structure is
Mm.
of this season, because like how much can you continue to get out of some people sitting around some white walls in a cubicle and then going down mysterious hallways? Like eventually, just as a conceit, that sort of runs out. And so I'm just fascinated to see how there's like that works for a season because it's novel.
Well, season 1 spent a lot of time with Mark's outie.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time with Mark's outie, and so like we spent a tiny bit of time with Helly's outie and Irving's outie, and basically no time with Dylan's outie. So I
Right.
think there's like open question of like, are we going to spend more time?
Right. So that's my
Like, outside the-
thought
yeah,
is like
right.
I think how much are we stuck with these people? How much are we going to get glimpses of the outside, and how are we going to get those glimpses? I think that's what I'm interested to see, where a little bit more of the structure reveals itself. Probably at least a little bit in the second episode is when the show has got to start laying down some cards on like, okay, here's what we're trying to do this season.
Yeah. I don't think the show's going to answer all the questions this season, but I think I think the show actually does a pretty good job of answering questions at a decent rate, other than the 3-year gap between seasons.
Yeah, I will like I read Alan Sepinwall over at Rolling Stone's review of the season, and I'm paraphrasing, but and it made me very excited for the second season. Was like, well, if you thought the first season's finale was bold, and how are they going to write themselves out of that one? Well, don't worry, they try it again. It's like, oh, like that makes me very excited that the show would have the confidence to try like another. I want it to keep taking big swings. Like that's what I want next week and beyond, is like just don't get comfortable. And that's just so easy to do once you get into a multi-season arc. And so there is a comfortability to like being back with these characters in this world. And that's the advantage of television, is like you get to spend time, but I hope it keeps taking big swings.
Yeah, when they talked about the season 1 finale, they talked about it as though if the show had ended there, they would have been happy. And honestly, I would have been happy too. I think that would have been like a great finale. And yeah, in terms of a season 3, according to Ben Stiller speaking to Collider, he said, "You have a responsibility to the audience that you're going somewhere with it. That's always been a part of it for us, really understanding where it's heading to. And Apple's been really supportive of that and sensitive to what the story is, and not saying, okay, this is something that has to keep going as long as it's successful. It should go as long as the story goes. And that's something we have an idea of, and we're working towards as we're starting up our season 3 work," end quote. So seems to imply that like people are on the same page, and season 3 is a thing that might happen. I certainly think that this show is a brilliant work of art, and whether or not they continue it or not, like whether they have the financial justification to continue it, like it's up to them. But even that they just financed 2 seasons, it is a massive swing on Apple's part, and I do salute them for producing something so bold and original, and pretty critical of a culture like Apple's, if we have to get right down to it, about what the show is trying to say.
Whether they endorse it or not.
Pretty
it
critical
ends up
of a
being that.
work culture like
But is
Apple's.
it? But David, isn't that what a capitalist company would do? Is like, oh, I mean, it's the Andor thing, right? Like, capitalism just subsumes its own critiques, and I don't know. That's that deep with Apple. I think they're just making a show.
They're just trying to make as much content as possible.
They just want people like they really want their services revenue to go up, and like subscribing to Apple TV Plus would help in that direction. But it is interesting to come from a company like Apple. I think that is coincidence, but it's an interesting coincidence. And as the show delves deeper into like who is this founder, like if it has answers about that, that will make potentially some of the parallels to Apple as a company theoretically more interesting.
Yeah. If I had to guess what mysteries we'll find out this season, like the fact that they're back on the Severance floor makes me feel like we will learn what exactly macro data refinement is up to this season. That's kind of if I had to guess, like the fact that they're in the status quo from last season is like you can't have them work on meaninglessness for 2 seasons. So that's one mystery I expect will be resolved by the end of the season. I don't know if we're going to know anything more about Lumen or what they're doing, what their grand plan is, what's up with Mrs. Casey, like all that stuff. Like that's one thing I feel somewhat confident about. We'll see if I'm right. Okay.
I think by the end, I think they're able to like permanently swap. I think they're able to like leave, like the innies become the outies, and like they're just. I think the outies get stuck in there.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, the whole idea of reintegration, I think, let's have that conversation next episode because I'm kind of
Don't like it. Ew. Yuck.
Petey reintegrated last season, and I'm kind of curious about the implications of that idea. Anyway, okay. You out there listening to this or watching this probably have your own theories. Really curious what they are for what's going on this season. Email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. Comment on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@decodingtv. And one thing that's great for a show like this is hearing people's reactions each week and seeing people's speculations. So we'd love to learn more about what you think is going on in the world of Severance and what you expect to see this season. Again, decodingtv@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube or at decodingtv.com. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.